A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man is a novel by the Irish modernist writer James Joyce. It follows the intellectual, moral and spiritual development of a young Catholic Irishman, Stephen Dedalus, and his struggle against the restrictions his culture imposes. Portraits can be placed in the tradition of the Bildungsroman, novels that trace the personal development of the protagonist, usually from childhood through to adulthood. Joyce contrasts the rebellion and the experimentation of adolescence with the somber influence of Stephen's Catholic education. The childhood of Stephen Dedalus is recounted using vocabulary that changes as he grows, in a voice not his own but sensitive to his feelings. The reader experiences Stephen's fears and bewilderment as he comes to terms with the world in a series of disjointed episodes. Stephen attends the Jesuit-run Clongoweswood College, where the apprehensive, intellectually gifted boy suffers the ridicule of his classmates while he learns the schoolboy codes of behavior. While he cannot grasp their significance, at a Christmas dinner he is witness to the social, political and religious tensions in Ireland involving Charles Stewart Parnell, which drive wedges between members of his family, leaving Stephen with doubts over which social institutions he can place his faith in. Back at Clongowes, word spreads that a number of older boys have been caught smuggling, discipline is tightened, and the Jesuits increase use of corporal punishment. Stephen is strapped when one of his instructors believes he has broken his glasses to avoid studying, but, prodded by his classmates, Stephen works up the courage to complain to the rector, Father Conmee, who assures him there will be no such recurrence, leaving Stephen with a sense of triumph. Stephen's father gets into debt and the family leaves its pleasant suburban home to live in Dublin. Stephen realizes that he will not return to Clongowes. However, thanks to a scholarship obtained for him by Father Conmee, Stephen is able to attend Belvedere College, where he excels academically and becomes a class leader. Stephen squanders a large cash prize from school, and begins to see prostitutes, as distance grows between him and his drunken father. As Stephen abandons himself to sensual pleasures, his class is taken on a religious retreat, where the boys sit through sermons. Stephen pays special attention to those on pride, guilt, punishment and the four last things, death, judgment, hell, and heaven. He feels that the words of the sermon, describing horrific eternal punishment in hell, are directed at himself and, overwhelmed, comes to desire forgiveness. Overjoyed at his return to the church, he devotes himself to acts of ascetic repentance, though they soon devolve to mere acts of routine, as his thoughts turn elsewhere. His devotion comes to the attention of the Jesuits, and they encourage him to consider entering the priesthood. Stephen takes time to consider, but has a crisis of faith because of the conflict between his spiritual beliefs and his aesthetic ambitions. Along Dollymount Strand he spots a girl waiting, and has an epiphany in which he is overcome with the desire to find a way to express her beauty in his writing. As a student at University College, Dublin, Stephen grows increasingly wary of the institutions around him, church, school, politics and family. In the midst of the disintegration of his family's fortunes his father berates him and his mother urges him to return to the church. An increasingly dry, humorless Stephen explains his alienation from the church and the aesthetic theory he has developed to his friends, who find that they cannot accept either of them. Stephen concludes that Ireland is too restricted to allow him to express himself fully as an artist, so he decides that he will have to leave. He sets his mind on self-imposed exile, but not without declaring in his diary his ties to his homeland. I go to encounter for the millionth time the reality of experience and to forge in the smithy of my soul the uncreated conscience of my race. James Joyce portrays Stephen as a person with a rebellious attitude. He does not only show revolt against the injustice but also reacts to the mistakes that he makes. His classmates often make fun of him even though he does not enjoy the company of ordinary minds. It is not the case that every time he does the opposite, but he does what he feels is right no matter how much he has to pay for it. For example, the aforementioned incident of Pandybat is worth mentioning again in this regard. He takes a stand against the malpractice of the father. In addition, being a child, Stephen accepts everything as it is. He perceives things through smelling and hearing. He loves his mother and family, but with the passage of time and development in his character, he becomes mature enough to create a difference between right and wrong. Realizing that his father has cheated on him, he does not like him, and the double standards of his father create hatred in his mind. Apart from that, things become complicated for Stephen as time passes by. In his childhood, he did not differentiate the real meanings of words, and being innocent did not take any action against anything. However, when he became mature, he visualized through his mind's eye. He commits adultery first like any other common man, but subsequently, at the beach, he imagines a girl, who is just like him, and he makes an opinion about her without any negative thoughts. Most artists become rebels too early. It is the story of an artist, hence, rebelliousness is apparent in a portrait of the artist as a young man. Since earliest childhood, novels and poems help Stephen make sense of the world around him. From the very first scene of the novel, in which infant Stephen creates a little rhyme from Dante's threat that eagles will come and pull out his eyes, words shape and brighten Stephen's experience. The sounds of words puzzle and enlighten him, and novels like The Count of Monte Cristo help him shape his adolescent identity. At times, beautiful phrases from poems thrill him as much as real romantic experiences. Yet, though Stephen's inner experience melds art and life, Stephen the young poet and aesthete believes there must exist a great distance between them. He imagines art as the vapory spirit soaring high over the city of the real. Drawing on the philosophy of Aristotle and St. Thomas Aquinas, Stephen decides that art must inspire only philosophical abstractions about emotions, ideal pity or terror, but not real emotions themselves. He thinks passions like love and anger are too lowly for art. In his own poetry, he omits random or unsavory detail in favor of high romantic abstraction. Excrement or a child or a louse finds no place in his art. Joyce's novel itself, of course, includes everything Stephen omits: passion, crudeness, dirt, randomness, contradiction. The novel itself gently mocks and refutes Stephen's youthful theories that once belonged, perhaps, to the young Joyce himself. Throughout the novel, Stephen is frustrated by the limitations of Irish Catholic society. He is expected to conform to the religious dogma limiting his thoughts and expressions and reject his calling to be an artist. Joyce uses the story to show the formation of Stephen's individual identity, separate from the people and society he grew up in. As Stephen matures, his consciousness develops, and he can reject the shame and limitations inherent in his setting. The journal entries at the end of Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man show Stephen has fully embraced his desire to be a writer and is ready to form his own philosophy of life. The novel shows Stephen's journey from a member of the collective to an individual. As a child, he believed in the teachings of the church and the strict identity boundaries of his society. As he grows older, both these conflict with his own development as an artist and individual. Though Stephen tries to reject his calling and embrace the religion of his upbringing, Joyce shows that being an artist is Stephen's real spiritual calling. The novel explores what it means to become an artist. It is not easy to become an artist. Stephen decides to leave his family, friends, and country to become an artist. It happens at the end of the novel. Here we can see that Joyce suggests the artist be an isolated figure. Stephen turns his back on his community, religion, family. It is because he does not want any limitations and strongly wishes to become an artist. He leaves his community for his goal. But his goal is to give a voice to the very community. Soon Stephen realizes that his community will always be a part of him. It is because his community created and shaped his identity. James Joyce's A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man is a captivating evocation of the emotional, intellectual and creative coming of age of the young Stephen Dedalus, essentially Joyce's alter ego. The originality and inventiveness of its modernist style prefigures Joyce's yet more experimental masterpiece Ulysses and offers a profound, poetic insight into Joyce himself as well as a personal journey of awakening and rebellion.